Welcome to another Triad InfoSec webinar. Your host, Josh Wathen, here to ask all the dumb questions because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm joined by Stephen and Patrick today, the CEO and CFO of Owners in Honor. This is going to be one of our Veterans Helping Veterans edition. If you guys would give us a couple of minutes about yourself, how you got here, where you came from, what you're doing now. Let's start with you, Patrick.
All right. I am a 26-year veteran of the United States Army, about 4 years in reserves, 22 in special operations, 20 of which as a Green Beret. Uh, Before retiring, went to Duke Business School, Fuqua, and then worked after I immediately retired at Anderson, which is a tax and consulting firm, for 3 years as the director of practice management group in Southern California. Since then, I've founded or co-founded Owners in Honor, which is a veteran entrepreneur organization that helps veterans get educated, receive advising in order to be successful with a business acquisition and exit.
Awesome. That I don't know what to do with all of that. I'll have to digest it and come back with questions. Stephen, how about you? How'd you get here? What'd you do before this? What are you up to now?
Appreciate it. I started out as a CFO for a publicly traded oil and gas company, spent 33 years there, uh, have my MBA from Pepperdine, and I'm wired to be a protector. I never served myself, but really appreciate you guys that serve to protect our freedom and our ability to conduct business and in this case, train entrepreneurs. Appreciate that. And I was put in contact with Patrick, and we hit it off as to the mission of bringing veterans into entrepreneurial business ownership. And it touched all of those spots that I love and appreciate. I'm wired to be a protector, primarily financial, and appreciate those of you that have put yourself in front of the danger for me. So what I can do to give back, I'm going to do whatever I can.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate both of you guys being here. And now I know to call Stephen directly when we need money for things. That helps quite a bit. So if you guys don't know me, I'm Josh Wathen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Triad InfoSec, the host of this podcast. I don't know how I ended up in this position, but these guys invited me to be part of their board of advisors and give advice. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to help. But that's why they're joining us today. So, Owners in Honor, you kind of said it. You train veterans, they buy and sell businesses, but what does that really look like from a veteran's perspective when they're just checking out your website all the way to call it an exit? What's the journey?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So first off, is that our recommendation is that a veteran go to a baseline entrepreneur course. So there's a couple that are taught by different organizations. One that uh, is a very good baseline is taught by the Veteran Business Outreach Center, which is sponsored by the SBA or Small Business Administration. It's called Boots to Business. It's a great intro course to entrepreneurship to determine which path of entrepreneurship is best suited for you. We're partnered with most of the VBOCs. And so it's a great opportunity for someone to discover if it's something that they want to do or pursue as a startup. Do they want to pursue something that's really an acquisition or business buying? What flavor of business buying do they want to be able to do? Is it a franchise? Is it an independent business, et cetera? And then from that, then they would come to us, usually through a partner referral, but could be directly to our website. And then they apply to join, to really be considered to join the base camp. And the bar to be considered is pretty low, but it's baseline vetting to make sure that the person's a veteran spouse, or a Gold Star family member. And then we do an initial counseling with them when they first come in to determine, are they a good fit for acquisition? Is that for sure what it is that they want to pursue? Once we get, a thumbs up from both parties on that, then they join the base camp. The base camp is what would be considered a place where you could safely learn at your own pace. We do webinars monthly, of which I think Josh has given one. And those are anywhere from basic business acquisition language to understanding the SBA to understanding marketing opportunities during diligence or when you're looking at a company as far as like looking at the growth opportunities for it, most of which are presented by veteran business owners who are doing this for a living now. And the goal is to be able to try to illuminate the opportunities to veterans so that then at the end of that stage, they self-select. They self-select, then do something that we call a buy box exercise, which is really them identifying the geography that they want to be able to look in. Our recommendation is to only look in a single geography where you really want to live, not to canvass the entire country because one, I don't think it satisfies what veterans actually want to do, which is return home. And then two, is that it makes it that much more difficult to find an opportunity if you're actually looking everywhere. It's easier if you're looking in a specific area because most of it is human to human contact. So then the second one is, what does the veteran actually need to be able to earn for a living? So you look at what's the fancy business term is free cash flow available for the business that you're purchasing to then determine if that's going to satisfy your basic financial needs. In order to be able to do that, the veterans can be led through a couple different exercises to help them do some financial planning for themselves so that they can answer those questions with a high degree of certainty. Along with that, they've already prepared the SBA's personal financial data sheet, which will help them answer a lot of these questions and will help them get a loan later on. And then one of the other questions is, whether or not you can get an SBA loan. Once we get the first couple questions answered, what size business and where, then we have an idea of what size loan they actually need to pursue, in which case then we work with one of our partners to determine that they can be pre-qualified for a bank that actually fits their credit thesis or their lending thesis. So that then the bank that's associated with them, and something that a lot of veterans, I think a lot of people don't realize, is that even though the SBA guarantees the loan, similar to the VA guaranteeing the loan for a house, they don't determine how each bank loans its money. So each bank has its own underwriters and its own way of determining how they want to manage risk. So that being said, if you were to just jump on Google and Google SBA financing, the likelihood that you're going to be directed to a bank that's a good fit for what it is that you want to buy is relatively low. And then typically, if you don't work with an organization like ours, then you would go out and you would look for an SBA loan broker who, in truth, are really only associated with 4 to 6 banks anyway. And then they get a cut of the deal. And we're trying to reduce the number of people that are value extractors during the transaction process, if at all possible. And then the last thing is, when can they actually operate the business? We want people to be able to operate the business in as soon as 90 days. That doesn't mean that they have to quit their job. We actually don't want them to quit their job. But it does mean that if you're contractually bound with an organization such as the United States Army and you're not getting out anytime soon, then it's not a great time for you to start actively searching. Because when we search or when we approach a business with our veterans, we want to make sure that they're really ready to buy. Something that happens in the market right now is that there's a lot of people, because of a lot of information that's out there about buying businesses and the business buying opportunity, that aren't prepared to talk to a seller. And so sellers are getting very cynical, and the brokers that represent them are also getting very cynical, or M&A firms that are advising them. Once they then determine all that stuff, they get assigned a search and acquisition director who then meets with them weekly as they go through the search, gets feedback, helps direct them. We do multi-channel search. So everything from helping someone sort through biz by sell to helping someone prepare a buy sheet or buyer side sheet so that they can approach something that's off market, helping them narrow the targeting for an off market acquisition, contacting brokers, and that's a multitude of brokers, Transworld, Sunbelt, Murphy's, whichever, independent brokers. And then lastly, we have a couple different platforms that we partner with that are building themselves out. They're mostly startups right now, but they are establishing essentially the Zillow for business buying, which is going to be helpful because the acquisition for business, especially small business, is still a little bit nuanced. It's very nuanced. And so sometimes you can miss some detail. Once they go through the acquisition or they're going through the acquisition, we have another partner that's a bank that then helps coach them on their capital requirements. So everything from, are you going to use an SBA loan? Is there going to be seller financing? If there is seller financing, what level do you actually need? What is your collateral that you're going to have to bring to the table? How much can you actually, if you had an outside investor, how much could the investor actually invest based on the bank that you're going to work with? And then the transaction goes through. Transaction goes through. We partner with M&A attorneys and CPAs that then oversee a lot of the preparation that we do to get them ready for it. And then the business is closed, and it's really the advising that we do. So a lot of backstop for the person who's actually looking. Then once the business is purchased, that search and acquisition director drops off, and then they get two other advisors instead. And the first advisor is an executive coach that's almost always coming from a different veteran transition organization, like the Commit Foundation, the Honor Foundation, that then focuses really on the whole veteran and their family, less so on the opportunity to grow the business. But all the different things that a veteran goes through in their transition, because it's a highly psychologically distressing period in a person's life. And so we want to make sure that they have a backstop for that. And then the other advisor that they get is a small business advisor, and that could be from a partnered company that we subcontract. And then that person's really focused on growth of the business, building a value creation plan, ensuring then that person is connected to allied service providers, which I mentioned earlier. That could be anything from corporate insurance to diligence to marketing firms to whatever. Because the typical business school answer for how long it takes someone who's a new or first time acquirer to identify a problem and then solve it is about 18 months. And so that's why there's a terminology called the J curve, that when you buy the business, it dips initially. And it dips because there's a really high rate of learning that needs to happen with the buyer. They don't typically have a robust network of people that can help solve problems. And so we're set up to be able to minimize the opportunity cost of that, to ideally flatten the J curve. So instead of it losing in the first year to potentially 3 years profits, they actually flatten out initially and then scale, so that then we get the opportunity to then partner with them as the company grows. And once they don't need us anymore, then they have the opportunity at year 5 to be able to break the engagement. We have the opportunity at year 10 to break the engagement. So we're not in a parasitic relationship that doesn't benefit them in any way.
If I can step back and backfill one of those pieces that's super important is you talked to Patrick about that SBA loan. And one thing that a lot of folks don't realize is they go out and they apply to an SBA loan with an inadequate application, and then they're always trying to play catch up with every other bank, backfilling information they missed or not understanding. So one of the things that we have is a group of folks that comes alongside and helps them get that prepared in the first place so that they're getting a yes, not a no or a backfill more information and then trying to catch up. So there's a lot of associated services and partners that we're bringing in, as Patrick mentioned, for due diligence, getting those people that have experienced. I always like to say that, all learning comes from pain. It doesn't have to be your own. And when we've got people that have done acquisitions and gotten taken advantage of, they're going to share with the veteran how to do it and not have the problems that they've experienced.
Awesome. So I feel like a deer in headlights right now. And I kind of do this for a living as an entrepreneur. It's a lot of information throughout the process, a lot of moving parts. How achievable is it? Right? Yeah, from a structure standpoint, from the personnel standpoint, well, what's the measure of success when a veteran comes in and says, "Hey, I want to do this," and you've got all these moving pieces? Is it really that simple, that as long as you show up and check the boxes and take good advice that you're good to go? Or is there some intangible parts of this that you're really looking for in the candidates?
Yeah, so the one thing that and I mentioned it a little bit with them, either, both going through a different baseline entrepreneur course, and then them also going through a different veteran transition course, is that more often than not, so there's three reasons. So without any assistance at all, one out of every three acquisitions is profitable within the first 3 to 5 years. That's just basic data. With assistance, if you pay for an M&A firm to help you, et cetera, it's almost 90%. So for us, the goal is to be able to mirror what an M&A firm would typically do, except do it as a nonprofit, so at a much lower market cost. And then also because we don't have to pay shareholders, our goal is to return as much value as possible to the veteran to then not make it financially burdensome or feel like it's a value extractor in the process of it. But the thing that's the intangible for the most part is the veteran knowing themselves. So there's three reasons that businesses aren't successful in the first 3 years, three primary reasons. Number one is a poor acquisition. So does that mean that the veteran made a mistake or the business buyer made a mistake? Sometimes. Sometimes it's that a business has been overrepresented, an inadequate amount of diligence has been done. There's been some sort of black swan that's been baked into the deal and you don't realize it. A lot of times that happens to first-time buyers because they're not, to Stephen's point, astute and they haven't seen the warning signs before. So
Yes.
that's, with the search and acquisition director, our goal is to mitigate or minimize that to almost zero. Then the second reason is lack of experience. And when you talk about lack of experience, principally it's what I talked about before. It's that opportunity cost of 18 months. So if you can shorten that opportunity cost and get a vetted allied service provider to be able to help you identify the problem and solve the problem in 6 months instead of 18 months, then the likelihood of you being successful is that much higher. And then the last reason is personal issues. So personal issues mean what? So it could mean anything from I have retired from the military and I want to go be an entrepreneur because I hate working for other people. And I am now coming from a place of, in essence, fear or scarcity. And I'm therefore pursuing something impulsively. I'm not giving it enough time to mature. As they say within our former profession, Josh, maintain operational patience. And so sometimes that isn't happening because there's a lot of things happening at the same time. So you potentially are moving your family, you're leaving a career that has identified you for potentially a couple of decades. You're having to uproot your kids and put them in a different school. You're talking to employers, you're potentially interviewing, you might be going to school. There's a lot of stuff that's going on all at once. And so when that happens, the tendency sometimes is that veterans then are like, I'm not going to burden my family with this information. And so I'm just going to go do the thing. And I had the opportunity to sit on a veteran panel at Rice University, and one of the things that the banks talked about is that the likelihood of a loan becoming insolvent or a company becoming insolvent and them having to reclaim the loan is extraordinarily high if the buyer doesn't talk to their spouse. So when you're running a small business, there's a reason that they're called family businesses. It's because the whole family needs to be involved. If your income is coming from the thing that you own, then it is how you determine, ideally with your spouse, you are going to spend that free cash flow, or there's other words for it, but the money that you're making from it, are you going to invest it back in the company? Are you going to pay yourself? Are you going to pay employees? Whatever. And if you're not having that discussion, there is a high likelihood that the 68 hours work a week that you're doing when you first take over a company is not going to be understood by your spouse because they see that the company is growing in value. They see that you're having employees, but their life hasn't changed. So they don't understand why. And so that's a big part of it. The other part is really asking, I guess, the 5 whys about why it is really that entrepreneurship is for you. So we're not in the business of giving people horror stories. Some people, I think, do a fair amount of gatekeeping with entrepreneurship because it was hard for them. So they either want to see the same amount of hazing go to the next generation, or they or they are intentionally, or they maybe have a misperception that there's not enough opportunity out there, and they don't want to compete against those other folks. And so the if you go to a business panel where you have 6 business owners or 8 business owners, each one of them has acquired differently, run their business differently, run their personal life differently. Everything is different. And so it's really hard, I think, if you're someone sitting in the room trying to extract the commonality of that to identify a pattern, to try to get that in a half hour, hour and a half, which is typically how it's presented. And so for us, it's that we want to make sure that one, they get the executive coach, and the executive coach is already familiar with veterans. So a lot of the stuff that comes with it is ensuring that you're talking to your family, ensuring that you're taking care of yourself, whole person, whether that's faith, fitness, family, all the things that have been proven through time to really be value adds to not just business owners but to human beings. And sometimes those are the first things to go when you go through a big rite of passage and things change. And so it's ensuring that we're backstopping that. And that's really sort of that outlier of know thyself before you get involved in this. And it's okay to be committed, but not have a timeline. That's the whole purpose of the base camp. So yes, I want to do this. I don't know when the right time is going to be. You're going to feel the calling when it's the right time. If you feel pushed into the process, then it's probably not the right time for you.
Yeah. And having that over idealized notion of what it means to be a business owner, I get to do this or I get to have this benefit, that idealized view of it can be harmful. But from an outside perspective, as a non-veteran, one of the things that I really, really love is that the Stockdale principle. I see in every veteran that I talk to a much better grasp of the reality of a situation than is common in most business. And I think going back to your original question, can everybody do it? The answer is yes, everyone can. Every veteran that comes through the program can be a business owner. What's fantastic is that coming through that original training, the base camp elements, is helping the individual gather the information and ask the right questions. Do they want to do it? Do they want to do what it takes to be a business owner? Or is there a different path that's better for them or better for their family? And so once they get through that process and determine with the right questions, the right background information, yes, this is exactly where I'm going, they are very, very likely to succeed because they've got that really brutal grasp of reality. They know what it's going to take. And part of the program is helping map the language set from what their training has been into what the business ownership is going to take.
Okay, this is starting to make more sense to me now. And that it's achievable. Thousands and thousands of people have done this. There are some serious skills that you need, and that's why we lean on some professionals to do this. I would say, and maybe this is me making an assumption that's not valid, but to me, it's, well, I don't have $1 million. How do I buy a business? And I'm not sure how funding and leverage, and I don't know that I don't even know how to fill out a loan application, right? Being that commonality can be one of the most difficult things to find, or maybe doesn't exist among entrepreneurs. Let's see if we can dial in on a couple of commonalities within Owners in Honor and the way you target. And let's start with what's the size of a business? I mean, how big of a loan are we talking about? What's the range there? And how much money do I have to put up when I do that, if any? What does that situation look like?
Yeah, so I'll start with the how much money do you have to put up question, and then I'll back into all the other stuff. So the how much money you need to put up really is a lot of this stuff depends on the deal structure, but the typical amount for an SBA loan, the SBA loans that we use to structure as a backstop, doesn't mean you have to use an SBA loan. You just have to be able to qualify for one so that we know that your credit's good enough that someone else isn't going to take advantage of you. You need to fix those things before you do something else, because there's ways to get to money privately that may not be in your best interest. And we talk about it in the sense of cost of capital. So it really depends on what your long-term goals are and how expensive you want that capital to be. And that's not just dollars and cents expensive, but it could be relationship expensive, it could be time expensive, a lot of other things. So, and that's fine. It's just math. So it's just a matter of, is this a risk I'm willing to take, and is there a way to mitigate it as best I can? But so with the SBA right now, and I'm not giving either legal or financial advice. I just want to make that clear. Is that the SBA, and the reason I say that is the SBA changes its rules pretty often. And so right now, a typical individual who's pursuing an SBA backed guarantee needs to put up 20% of, they need to guarantee 20% of it. So different states handle it differently. Texas doesn't allow you to use equity in your home. Other states do. Sometimes it's everything from equity and any other property you may have. There's different financial vehicles that you could convert, everything from 401ks to IRAs to include cash in the bank, et cetera, et cetera. So for a veteran, however, 10% of that is waived right now. And so it ends up being 10% that you really need to collateralize. In the deal structure, there are ways to mitigate that, in that you can have a seller provide financing and do a seller's loan to the buyer, sometimes called a seller's note, that then is typically at a lower interest rate than the SBA. And then that can mitigate the amount of capital that's actually required to close. So that's considered part of that equity that you need to come up with or collateralize. So that's great. There are some people that have been able to close businesses with, large businesses. A 7A loan is typically $500,000 to $5 million. Those are the SBA limits. Some banks will extend it beyond that, but that really depends on the bank and its underwriters. And so there have been individuals who have purchased $500,000 businesses with, healthy cash flow of $150,000 or so, with less than $20,000, $30,000. Is that common? No. Is it possible? Yes. Is it something that you always pursue the ideal, understanding that the backstop's the most likely? And so in that, as you get educated to it, like Stephen was saying, there's been some education that's out there right now that sometimes overemphasizes looking for a business that you can be an absentee owner in, passive income, that you can potentially be a part owner of multiple platforms and be able to essentially flip them like homes. There are different strategies of doing things. We don't recommend those. We are pretty conservative in our recommendations, our advisory strategy. And that is the principle behind our advisory strategy is we want the first acquisition to be a successful acquisition, even if it's smaller. There are two reasons that sometimes pursuing a smaller acquisition is better. One, you mitigate sometimes your exposure, your risk exposure, because it's the fewer people that obviously you're working with, fewer contracts, fewer smaller revenue streams, et cetera, less exposure as far as your debt. And also your learning curve could be pretty good. A lot of times people don't pursue those smaller ones because they have an idea that they need to be able to, if they're going to be an independent owner, they need to be making $500,000 a year or more. And so the interesting thing that is sometimes left out of that conversation is that in a purchase of a business, you're not buying a job. You are not buying, your W-2 and your 401k that'll come from owning a business, but you're actually building an asset in an asset class that is more valuable than any other asset class in the United States. And so as you consider that those are the conversations that you have with your coach as a veteran to help understand what is your long-term goal. Do you want to buy a company that has a steady up and to the right growth pattern that doesn't have a lot of hiccups, that's in a very stable industry? Do you have an aspiration to acquire more properties and combine them together to then sell together or then to interoperate? Do you want to buy a company, learn a lot of stuff, and then instead of what would happen typically on the market is that I buy a company, I learn a bunch of stuff, I sell it, I lose money, and then I try it again? Is that Now you have the opportunity to actually sell it to another veteran at market value. You're not losing a lot of money because a lot of the value extractors aren't involved. So now you can make sure that that thing that you built, just like when you were in the military, whether it's a, you know, detachment, platoon, squad, company, whatever, section, are all things that now you've built it up, and the next band woman is going to take it that much further than you did. So there's a lot of different opportunities for us to be able to provide assistance, but the main thing is to have, you know, like even in this conversation, to your point, like this is a lot, it seems. And you're right. And we would never lay out all of this information in a single coaching session with any of the people that we work with. So
Right.
the goal is to not, you know, dump them into boiling water and say, hey, hope you can figure it out. And doesn't that suck? What we really want to be able to do is slowly introduce them to the process of it. And as questions come up naturally, to be able to build on that learning. So it's really continually growing, like your baseline understanding of something, so that then, like the military does, you know, the skill level 1, skill level 2, skill level 3, et cetera, training, is that eventually when you exit your business, then you have the opportunity to provide mentorship and return back to other veterans instead of, unfortunately, a lot of business owners right now who exit don't have a sense of meaning in their life. They have no succession or exit plan once they sell their business, and so a lot of them go through some really hard times. You know, and I didn't realize this until I was at a different veteran business panel, but the two most prevalent groups of suicide in the United States, number one is veterans. A lot of people know that. Number two is small business owners, and it's the loss of identity, loss of meaning, loss of an ability to contribute to the community. And sometimes, if you have had a legacy business that has been family owned for multi generation, loss of your entire family story. And
Yeah.
so for us, what's interesting is that the veterans that we work with, like most veterans, actually want to steward that legacy instead of replace it. And they want to build on something that someone did in the past, knowing that nothing that was built in the past. I mean, it's like the comments about perfectly good aircraft in the United States Air Force. Like there are none. And so the point of a very well-run aircraft is its crew and its maintenance staff to be able to make it, you know, fly at its optimum, you know, abilities. And so it's the same thing. So you're really taking something that someone else has been taken care of, and you're allowing that to be stewarded by a different individual without completely forcing the other person out of the picture.
Well, and one of the things that happens too is, you know, we talk about, or people analogize a business acquisition or a merger as a marriage, and it is in some ways, but it's also a funeral to the person who has developed a dream and built a business. Their idea of what that can become can end there. They need to be able to work with somebody to coach them along to develop a new vision, a new strategy of where they're going next. And so walking along with the person who's exiting the business is also one of the key elements of what we're able to do. But let me roll back, Patrick, if I could, real quick. When you're talking about the question of an absentee owner or a passive business, one of the things that is strategic advantage, you've got to ask yourself, what am I bringing to this? Why am I better at this? Or what am I doing that is different than anybody else? And a passive business or an absentee owner, anybody can do that with capital. You know, that you're competing directly with private equity firms if you're doing that. What we want to do is get the person to ask themselves, is it my work effort? Is it my diligence? Is it my knowledge base in what I've been trained before now? What is the advantage that I, as the veteran, when I'm buying this business, am going to be able to add something new to this and unlock additional value? So from a purely passive standpoint, that's not a great goal to go straight head to head with a private equity firm and just be a capital provider. They've got to be bringing themselves into that business to help it to grow and succeed.
That makes a lot of sense. on a lot of different levels. I think one of the things that really struck a chord with me was carrying the torch. It seems that's a big part of being in the military, is that platoon, that company, that brigade that you're a part of, has been there for probably more than 100 years, right? In most cases. And so you're going to wear that patch, say that motto, and live that credo, even though you didn't start it. And so, in putting a veteran into this situation, I can definitely understand how a small business owner that's looking to sell their business but wants their legacy to live on, have their people taken care of, would really entertain the idea of putting a veteran in place that understands the power of the platoon. And so I guess the question that I have around that is, are you seeing an interest from the business owners that are exiting, to mentor the veterans that are buying the business? Does that conversation come up?
Yeah, so I just had an opportunity to spend some time with the Exit Planning Institute, who has about 9,000 certified exit planning advisors that include everything from M&A advisors to exit planners to wealth advisors to estate attorneys. And when I talked to them about the opportunity, some of like an estate planner that I know currently has clients that have upwards of probably 50 small businesses. Some of the clients have multiple small businesses, and their main reticence right now for exiting is that they don't want to sell it to someone who doesn't want them to be part of it at all. And they don't want to sell it to someone who is just going to be a value extractor from the community. And so they're kind of looking for the perfect buyer, and someone who wants to return to the community, someone who wants to be able to donate to Little League just like they did. And those folks within the current market of a lot of people that have been engaged or excited about business acquisition are less available than are needed, I think, by the number of sellers that would really like that as a transition. And so the interesting thing that, and Stephen brought it up, is that one of the big market differentiators of what we can provide as a veteran is that the veterans want to be engaged in this process. They want to be, almost categorically, they want to be able to contribute back to their community. 80% of veterans who entered service would like to return back to their home of record. Only 30% do. And the primary driver for that is economics. So if you can figure out the economics, you can get a lot more people home, which solves really two problems. One problem, it solves those business owners who are exiting, who need someone to buy it, who cares about the community. That's one. The second problem that it solves is actually recruiting. So if you could tell the story that a veteran served in the military, got aptitudes that they didn't have necessarily before, aptitudes and training, and then they came back to their own community and contributed those things that the United States government is, and the whole country's taxpayers have paid a pretty penny for, to come back and return that value back to a community. That's a great story. And when I was in Army recruiting in Los Angeles, it was the story. It was the main reason that parents were reticent about their sons and daughters joining the military. It was not the danger of it. It was actually the sense that if their son or daughter joined the military, they would leave and never come home. And so it was, how can we, and there are different techniques that we did in Army recruiting to partner with local companies to make sure they got exit interviews. But this is a great way that basically fills out the rest of that, is that you're getting a lot of folks with a lot of really high aptitude for success, involved in contributing back to the communities that we recruited them out of as the military.
Yeah. And the love and care for their community when they get back home. There's nothing like the care and the value that they bring back to that home community.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that that's felt in reverse. Certainly is for me, being back in Houston area where I grew up, is that the folks that I grew up with, I mean, let's call it what it is. I was kind of a turd when I was a teenager, but I came back after being of service, a totally changed person. And because I had signed up and done that, I was welcomed with a lot of open arms from people who kind of was looking at me sideways when I left. And so I feel that now, and just trying to network and generally be a good human, that there's a lot of doors that open that I have no business having opened for me just because of the reputation that the military carries and that I signed up to be of service. So I can see that being a complete full circle when it comes to the reciprocation from the veteran in and the community out. Um, so I dig it. I'm all over it, right? I love the mission. I think that what you're doing is not only full of purpose on a lot of different fronts, but that it seems like it's becoming a finely tuned engine and has a high likelihood of success, not only for um, the story and longevity and journey and fruition of the veterans that are involved, but also the economy and the country as a whole. That's a beautiful thing, and it's hard to find that synergy and really make it work at the center and put service and sacrifice in the middle of a capitalistic engine and use that for a grand purpose. And keeping small business, I'm all over that, right? We've seen the aggregation of wealth to the top just keep rising over the year. So
Well,
my
and to
real
your point,
question,
what it does to the community and showing the community what the military service did for that individual, the
yeah,
recruiting aspects of that come about. So it's a full circle.
And
yeah,
it's a changing of the narrative too, I think, Josh, where like there's a lot of communities that there's been a tremendous amount of support for veterans in the sense of mental health support and homelessness. And I can submit that I think the average for training for like special operators or like you and me is that like the good taxpayer spends anywhere between like 1.5 and 4.5 million dollars for our training. And that's the most expensive business school that you could possibly ever go to. And it is also one of the only places that as a business school, you have to practice what you preach. Otherwise, you're not going to be graduating. And so the ability to be able to return that amount of taxpayer dollars back to the taxpayer in the sense that you are committing to communities and community growth, vice your own, wealth capture that sometimes, at the end of the day, capitalism is capitalism, right? So I'm not mad at private equity. And there's a lot of opportunity because there's going to be a lot of turnover. Our goal is to be able to demonstrate an asymmetric advantage over what they can provide to the table so that business owners who want to exit have an opportunity to preserve their legacy in a way that they want it. And I would submit that the biggest thing that we need is for more veteran or more business owners to understand that there are dozens, if not hundreds of veterans waiting in the wings to be trained by us to be able to be deployed to then buy their businesses. And if we were aware of more businesses that were able to be sold or interested in selling to a veteran, we'd be able to meet the need, I think, pretty easily.
okay. So that's kind of where I was getting ready to go is what's the need in owners and honor. So understanding the market presence of businesses that are available is definitely something that we need to connect you guys to as much as possible. But I mean, how do you fund the engine that is owners and honor? How do we make sure that this is fully staffed and it's built for longevity? That it's a resilient machine that can scale. Well, what does that whole process look like internally?
Well, counterintuitively, we're running a startup. So most startups are run on hope at first. So the hope engine's doing pretty well. And that's really it's partly hope, but mainly it's really a culture that you create within an early organization that people want to contribute because they feel it fits their personal values propositions. And then, like Steven said it best as to why he even felt like getting involved in it. And it creates stress, of course, because folks like Steven right now are principally volunteers. And normally he'd be very well compensated on the open market. So that's a big deal. For us, the main ways that we really have like three major revenue streams. So one is two are traditional, one's more innovative. The traditional ones are we're a charity, so we do engagements. Like we're doing the shoot and the dinner in Houston in February. That's going to be a great event where folks can come out. meet operators, like special operators or business operators, be able to shoot and mingle with them. The night before, likely having a dinner with them, athletic booster dinner where you're actually demonstrating the commitment to community. Not necessarily, although it's very exciting to see Navy SEALs come out of the back of a CH-47 helicopter. For those of you on the podcast who don't know what a CH-47 is, but the goal is not for us to have a big splashy splash and raise a gajillion dollars in every event. It's to demonstrate the impact of community and get community to get involved. Because at the end of the day, the dollars that the community commits to helping us, especially at the very beginning, are dollars that are going to help save their own community. And so, if we can keep HVAC companies privately held, the likelihood of your cost going up to have HVAC service is super high. The fact that HVAC company is likely going to be able to have a profit and then therefore have a tax burden and then therefore have an incentive to be able to create charitable giving opportunities to whether it is your church, your community, or any other clubs that you may be a part of. That's highly likely. And then the second way that's traditional is grants. So right now, the grant situation in the United States is a little bit messy. So there's been a lot of changes in the last couple months, and because of that, some of the subordinate organizations that need to digest the changes haven't really been that agile. Bureaucracy is what it is. It's not exactly an agile animal. And so the last one, however, which is the one that really creates the most sustenance, is one that where during the transaction process, there's a tax benefit to the seller to be able to minimize capital gains tax by creating a charitable donation. So there's a couple different ways of doing that. One of the ways that would benefit both the seller and also the acquirer most is if they were to donate shares of their company or a percentage of their company to the nonprofit specifically, instead of into a donor advised fund that then manages it and then has a management fee as well. What that does is that then takes off the table a little bit of the amount of money that the veteran has to come up with to actually purchase. And what it does is it grants us shares in the company to then be able to help them manage it. So our goal is that up to 10% would be granted to us, 5% really for the search and 5% for the advising that goes on for up to 10 years. And the goal then is that at year 5, once it typically there's 2 big step ups for a company when it really hits growth, and one is year 3 to 5, the other one is year 10, once you've completely paid off your debt. And so for us, we really want to make sure that the offering that we have as far as advisory services and the cost of which would come from that equity sharing and profit share, is less than anything they could possibly find in the market. However, we're also providing them as a general contractor, subcontractors who do this for a living for sometimes 3 times the amount of money. But their vested interest is the fact that we can provide them tax credit for the fact that they are providing us a service at below market rate. So it's a benefit to them as well. And then long term is that then the buyer or the veteran has the opportunity at year 5 to say, hey, I'm all set. I think I'm good. I'd like to contract your services at an extraordinarily light touch. So I'm going to buy that equity back from you guys before it gets too expensive for me. And then that's it. And then we maintain a relationship with them because they'd still be part of our network, always a backstop to them. So they always have a community and a tribe. And then at year 10, so that our interest in advisory services have an end, is that at year 10, then we are able to call capital or to ask for our equity back. At which point, then we have a 36-month recapitalization, meaning they don't have to pay us back right away, but they get 3 years to really pay us back, which then creates a low level of stress that is typical among investors. So when companies invest in other companies, they only want to do it to the benefit of themselves because they are a capitalist organization that needs to provide shareholders value and they need to minimize their risk at every cost. As a nonprofit, we don't have a shareholder responsibility. So our responsibility is to create as much opportunity to return that opportunity to the veteran or the person that we're providing the service for as a nonprofit. Obviously, we from that, there's an administrative cost. Our administrative costs right now are estimated to be at less than 20%, which puts us in the platinum rating for any nonprofit. And over time, that could potentially be minimized to almost negligible, based on the fact that with profit sharing, we're not really going to have to be able to carry very much administrative costs. It'll probably be just my salary and then my salary, the CEO salary or whoever's the CEO at the time, I guess. But the CEO salary and then some marketing stuff that wouldn't be considered part of programming.
Well, underpinning two of those three elements of finance, and I wouldn't be the CFO without getting the weeds a little bit, but the appreciated asset giving, whether that's through just the direct donation side, as Patrick mentioned in that sale process with the business seller, giving up an appreciated asset is Uncle Sam's legal way of doing double dipping. When you've invested in that business and you've put your original capital in it, now you're selling it for a 10x, you're getting to deduct that full appreciated value without recognizing the income on the growth. So if you're considering a gift to owners in honor, if you're a seller and you're giving a part of that equity sale process, you're getting a full deduction for the appreciated value regardless of your original basis.
I don't know what any of that means, but it sounds awesome.
Yeah. So
Tax advantaged giving.
in
Yeah,
layman's
no,
in
I'm
layman's
joking.
terms, you are incentivized to minimize your exposure to Uncle Sam taking a lot of the money during a transaction. So the typical way that that is done is that you create a donor advised fund, which is managed then by a wealth advisor or a bank typically. They have an administrative cost. So they're extracting anywhere between 20 and 10 to 20% of the value of the donor advised fund in order to run it. And then you have the obligation usually at least annually to give them direction as to where those funds need to go. You also have the personal obligation to set up a trust in case you pass away as to what goes with that. And all of that comes with cost and complication. And so what we're saying is that we are uniquely positioned as a nonprofit, vice a for-profit company, to be able to simplify that whole process to basically do exactly what Stephen said. The tax benefits are extensive, which is what Stephen laid out, but the baseline is gift it directly to the nonprofit, don't have to go through all the other wickets, and then you're going to get a similar, if not more, tax advantage.
But this is comprehensive is the word that comes to mind, right? Which is not, I don't use that lightly, especially when talking about a veteran nonprofit, because most of them are very laser focused on solving one specific problem, one specific way. And this seems like a holistic solution for a ton of problems that maybe are better identified as symptoms, with the systemic problem being purpose, right?
Yeah. To your point, like, what are we actually trying to do? Like, what's the one thing that we're trying to do? The one thing that we're trying to do really is to provide veterans a pathway to empowerment on a path to purpose is sort of the catchphrase, through ownership or through really self-actualization. So to help them be the thing that they are most capable of. That's really the goal. And then from that, it's just been surprising. I'm probably surprised every couple of weeks at the different benefits that have come from it. So whether it's tax benefit to a seller, whether it's legacy carrying on to a seller, whether it's being able to contribute to a community that otherwise would have been extracted from, whether that's mental health, aspects that we really didn't completely consider that apparently are significant. There's all of these different aspects that is not the goal, but they're great secondary and tertiary effects that have really foundationalized or really buttressed up what it is that we're doing. And I think it's created for especially folks like, Stephen, who is currently powered on hope, give them, the essence of, wow, this is a much bigger thing than just doing one thing. We're still only doing one thing, really. And we're laser focused on making that the best thing possible. But the beauty of it is that I think when you become, and you know this from other good veteran nonprofits that do great things like Camp Hope, right? is that what is it is to try to, give people a path back on, to get them back on track after something happened and they're, they've had to take a knee. What is the other benefits? The other benefits is that you're now connecting families that maybe got disconnected. You're connecting people back to their community. You're providing value to a community for people that otherwise have been a great big investment by the United States government and are otherwise not being utilized. And so like there's all these other benefits that come from it. Well, what's the main thing that they're trying to do? Have people not die who are veterans who have who've been put in a way that they're self-harming. And so it just happens to be that by trying to address that, you solve a lot of other problems too. But for us, like any other organization, we never want to be distracted or go down a rabbit hole of trying to solve those other problems. For us, it's the goal of, partnering with Camp Hope or other organizations like that, that if someone's in that, has that need, then they have a resource that we can refer them to. We want to be the person who has a guy. So like,
Yeah.
we want to do a very specific thing, but we also want to be a hub for people that have a guy. And so it is not to be the expert on startups. Like people have, who are interested in entrepreneurship approach me all the time. Hey, I have this startup idea. I'm super excited for them. And that is not what we do. But I know about 3 different organizations that can help them. And I will actively advocate for them to get to the right place. Does it support our mission? Not directly. Does it support our mission indirectly? Absolutely, because we're still getting a veteran to the point that he or she finds their path to purpose and then are empowered to do the thing that they're most capable of doing. So if that's startup and it's not acquisition, then I don't want them to go down the rabbit hole of acquisition. I want them to be the beautiful startup people that they want to be. That's a whole different entity. And so while they're both entrepreneurs, it's like saying that, a Navy SEAL and an F-18 pilot are both members of the military. They have distinctly different jobs.
Crack and all. Man, this is awesome. I really appreciate both of you gentlemen joining us for the podcast, webinar, recording, whatever. Here we are. Typically at the end of these things, I try and throw some word spaghetti at the wall to summarize what we've talked about and what we're doing. And to me, without throwing too many P words against the wall, I think when I think of owners and honor, I think patriots, I think purpose, and I think profits. And that seems to be the roadmap that we're looking for. If you're a patriot, veteran or not, you need to get in touch with these guys and figure out what's going on. If you're a veteran and you want to figure out how to make a living post-service, your purpose could be in a business because the business could be anything you want it to be. And ultimately, that helps you build generational wealth that allows you to be an influencing member and a contributing member to a community. I think that's really a beautiful thing that you guys are doing. So with that, I just want to say thanks one more time. And this has been Triad InfoSec with another Veterans Helping Veterans podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.
You bet.